Don't give up, you know it's true. You gotta do what you wanna do.
Hello, welcome to UPSC Gangsters. This is Arjun Aryan. I'll be taking you through the editorial analysis for the date 7th October from the Hindu newspaper. So let's begin. The first editorial heading says, "The smoke signals from China, how to read the signs from the forthcoming Communist Party Congress." So let's get started. In January this year, he took over as chairman of the Central Commission for Integrated Military and Civilian Development, only a few months after being hailed by the CPC as a co-leader. They are talking about Xi Jinping, alright, the current leader for China. So he has taken over the Central Commission for Integrated Military and Civilian Development, only a few months after being hailed by the CPC as a co-leader, an epithet that has thus far only been conferred on three leaders: Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, and Jiang Zemin. Alright, so if you're being called as the co-leader, you are a real important person in China, meaning you are almost compared to the founding fathers of the Chinese government, alright, so Chinese land. So he has been compared to that right now. The previous leaders were not given the names, or they were not compared to the co-leaders, alright. So next line: until Mr. Xi's presidency, China had followed Deng's diktat of Tao Guang Yang Hui, or keeping a low profile internationally, biding time while focusing on domestic economic growth. Okay, this was also discussed in one of the editorials, how China was following a policy of laying low, alright, not to attract international attention, and that is what exactly that happened. So this you have to remember, the low profile thing. Alright, it's under this policy that USA did not notice China's rise. Alright, so China was slowly developing, and USA was actually kind of engaged in wars and other battles and all, and they were distracted with other internationally dominant things, and China, in this shadow, they secretly grew. Alright, so China being a communist nation, USA would have been dead against China if China was publicly doing all these things, and it was very visible to the outside world. But they weren't doing that. They were laying really low, and by the time USA shifted its focus to the east, China was already grown by then. Alright, so now it is out of hand for USA. So this was the policy that was previously done, alright, maintaining a low profile and bidding some time. Next line: the leadership of the party had also evolved into a collective practice resembling a boardroom more than an imperial court, with Chinese politics increasingly tied to predictable procedures rather than rulers' caprice. Three strategies. Shin Kawashima, a Chinese scholar at the University of Tokyo, points out that Mr. Xi has deployed three strategies to amplify his power. Alright, so these are the three strategies you should remember. See, all these things can be used in your mains. Alright, so this will be very important for your mains, and you can quote these things. Alright, so the three points are: an anti-corruption blitzkrieg, a tightening of media control, and a restructuring of the military. So these are the 3 points that he has been focusing on, Mr. Xi. So these 3 points has been used to consolidate his power, to increase his power. Next line: the anti-corruption campaign has been a particularly useful tool, serving the dual purpose of toughening party discipline and purging inconvenient rivals. More than 200 officials, many of them in senior positions, have been removed in corruption probes, allowing Mr. Xi to place loyalists or associates of close allies in key positions. Alright, so the anti-corruption blitzkrieg, the anti-corruption campaign has been used to actually jail or put behind bars his political opponents. So under the excuse of anti-corruption, he is actually getting rid of those who are having opinions against him. All right. Next line. About 2,300 delegates from different provinces and constituencies like state-owned enterprises and the military will attend the meeting and elect the 200 plus members of the party central committee. Alright, so this is important. This is how the election happens, the indirect election of China, how it happens. Alright, so just remember that 2,300 delegates from different provinces will be meeting. Alright, so they will meet and will elect 200 plus members for the party central committee. Alright, so the party central committee in turn would vote for the CPC's most senior positions. At least 11 of the 25 members of the Politburo are expected to retire unless an informal rule that requires members to step down at 68 is relaxed. Alright, so it is an informal rule, or it's not a formal rule, it's not written anywhere that members who reach the age of 68 actually are stepping down. Alright, so for decency's sake probably they are stepping down at the age of 68, but it's not written anywhere. Alright, that's why the word informal is used. So you get the point, right? 2,300 delegates actually electing 200 plus members, and those 2,300 delegates are from constituencies and state-owned enterprises and all, right? And from the military too. So these will elect 200 plus members for the party central committee. These 200 plus members of the party central committee will in turn choose the most senior positions, all right, including the president of China, all right, the leader of China. Next line. One likely outcome is the enshrining of the Xi Jinping thought, the crystallization of the president's values and ideals in the CPC's constitution. This is standard practice for China's top leaders. However, other than Mao and Deng, no other leader has had their name tagged onto their thought. Alright, thought in quotes. So Mao Zedong thought, Deng Xiaoping theory are known as such, but Jiang Zemin's three represents and Hu Jintao's scientific outlook on development do not have their names appended in the constitution. So they even have their forefathers' views and ideas in the constitution directly in China. Alright, you have to remember that. Unlike in India, we have those ideas directly, and it's not like Gandhi has said this or Nehru has said this, and according to them these values, those kind of things are not written in our constitution. But there, the leaders' constitution, those ideas of the leaders, all right, are being inscribed in the constitution. So the constitution of China has ideas of those co-leaders, all right. So other leaders, even though they were visionary and all that, their names were not, ascribed to the constitution. But currently, it seems that Xi Jinping's ideas are gonna be included in the constitution. All right. So next line. But Jiang Zemin's three represents and Hu Jintao's scientific outlook on development do not have their names appended in the constitution. Whether or not Mr. Xi's name is added to this thought, which has not been given a formal title as yet, will consequently be another key indicator of his way within the party. So it's going to be an indicator of his power, basically, alright, whether his name is going to be ascribed to the constitution or not. Next line. Finally, the Congress will be scrutinized for any moves that might enable Mr. Xi to stay in a top leadership capacity, even after his second term as CPC General Secretary and Chinese President ends in 2022. For example, he might delay the designation of a successor. Alright, so whichever way you look at it, his thing is gonna end by 2022. Alright, the only way he could actually delay the things might be when he is trying to buy some time for designating a successor. Alright, so these are the important points in this editorial. Let's move on to the next. So the next one, the title says, Law, Faith and Reason banning evil practices by law is not enough. Social reform must be more broad-based. Alright, this editorial is basically about a law that was passed by a state that bans the black magic and all those kind of related stuff. Alright, so even though you have the criminal contempt and criminal laws, even though it can be booked by under cheating and criminal laws and all that, a separate law has been passed. Alright, so this editorial is about that. First line, mere legislation is not enough to eradicate superstition from society, but laws do have the utility value of curbing the prevalence of inhuman rituals and practices. Seen in this light, the proposed Karnataka law targeting black magic and inhuman practices may be regarded as social reform. The Karnataka Prevention and Eradication of Inhuman Evil Practices and Black Magic Bill 2017 has been approved by the state cabinet and is likely to be introduced soon in the assembly. Alright, so this is a bill, soon it's going to be an act. Alright, so whatever it is, do note down the bill. Alright, so the black magic bill, at least you should remember in that way. Alright, so it is not accurate to characterize this as just an anti-superstition bill, as what it seeks to prohibit are actions that offend human dignity, result in the exploitation of gullible and vulnerable people, or cause harm to them. Organizing macabre rituals, offering magical cures and threatening people under peril and incurring divine and supernatural displeasure are covered by this law. Even though these can be treated as offences under the Indian Penal Code too, perhaps ironically, it exempts established religious practices and the propagation of spiritual learning and arts besides astrology and Vastu. Alright, so Vastu and astrology, those things have not been banned under this. Alright, those things that come under this are the macabre rituals, magical cures and all that. Alright, so all those things have a mention under this book. Alright, but not the this traditional stuff. Alright, like palm reading and Vastu and all that. Those things have been left out in this bill. So next line. Overall, it tries to heed the line between religious traditions and superstitious practices. Maharashtra already has a law against black magic and other evil practices. Do note, very important. Alright, Maharashtra already has a law against black magic and evil practices. Alright, so next point. It is not clear if it has made much headway in eliminating blind faith, but it must be strengthened. It must strengthen the hands of people willing to take on social practices steeped in ignorance and unreason. The proposed law ought to be seen as a reasonable restriction on the right to practice and propagate one's religion under the Article 25 of the Constitution. As long as these restrictions are in the interest of public order, morality, and health, the law may withstand the test of constitutionality. Among the rituals, the bill outlaws. The previous point, please note that. Alright, the proposed law ought to be seen as a reasonable restriction on the right of practice and propagate one's religion under Article 25. So, where will this find some sort of opposition? Alright, if those people who wants to practice these kind of things, if they approach the Supreme Court, what will they actually pull out? They will pull out the Article 25 and say that it is against the Article 25 that says we have the right to practice and propagate one's religion. Alright, so these rituals and all, they are part of the religion, right? So they might pull this off. So this might be something that they should think about. Alright, next line. Among the rituals the bill outlaws is the Urulu Save, which is also known as made as snana, in which devotees roll over food leftovers, the practice of walking on fire, branding children, and piercing one's tongues or cheeks. Alright, so the bill outlaws these things too. Do remember that. Alright, I've just typed that anyway. So it outlaws these things too. It is hard to make a case for retaining these practices. However, it is possible that some may ask whether everything that appears irrational to be less believing should be prohibited by law. When the state ventures to identify some practices, mostly prevalent among groups in the social periphery, as incompatible with civilized norms, it must demonstrate that these are wholly inhuman or exploitative. So, when a state is trying to repeal certain practices and it tries to ban certain practices, what is going to be the criteria for it? The criteria is it must demonstrate that these are wholly inhuman, alright? So it might stand for something that is really inhuman, or it should be exploitative in nature. So if it's inhuman and exploitative in nature, the state can actually consider passing a law banning these practices. Next line. Ultimately, it is education and awareness that can truly liberate a society from superstition, blind faith, and abominable practices in the name of faith. Until then, the law will have to continue to identify and punish acts that violate the people's right to life, health, and dignity. Alright, so this is the final conclusion of the article. The final conclusion says ultimately it's education that is going to open people's minds and not and save the society. So this is a common point. Actually, education is the key to everything. Knowledge opens the doors for unlimited possibilities and everything in a positive way. Alright, so when education is provided, when education penetrates to every individual, there are a lot of good things that happens to a country, alright, to the economy, to the nation as a whole. So not only these blind faiths and practices, alright. So that is very evident in those places where education is like free, in those places where education is encouraged. And if you find a city or a state with a lot of educated individuals, you know how the state outlook itself is. Alright, there will be like less differentiation, less inequality, lesser riots, maybe riots and all won't be there only. Alright, and the economy of that state will be good. They'll be much more advanced in everything else. So all these things are there. So education is that one key that could save civilization and the people. Alright, so that is the last conclusive point in this.